If you're not familiar with Robert Falcon Scott, he was a British explorer, Navy officer, and he led two expeditions to the Antarctic. This is his second and last. I subtitled this "A Story of Triumph, Disappointment, and Tragedy," because the triumph was he did achieve his goal of reaching the South Pole. His disappointment was that Roald Amundsen beat him by 4 weeks to the pole. So when he got there, he found the Norwegian flag flying.
Oh.
And the tragedy is that he lost his life in Antarctica. I'm going to show you some postcards of the ship, the equipment he used, the men who traveled with him, and some of the memorials that were erected after his death. So here's a view of his ship, the Terranova, and the figurehead that graced the front of the ship. The figurehead survives in the Cardiff Museum today, and unfortunately, the ship is no longer with us. It after his trip, the ship was used for other purposes, and it actually sank off of Greenland in the 40s, I believe. Here's the better view of the ship, and it was used for supplying various other expeditions.
Could you explain what that tube is that's sticking up? Is that a special motor?
Sorry,
the chimney. Can you explain what that is?
Well, it wasn't strictly a sailing ship. It did have a steam engine, because coal powered engine on the ship.
So that's just a chimney.
It was, as I was saying, it sank off of Greenland because it caught on fire, and they shot holes in it to sink it purposely because they couldn't put the fire out. The remains of the ship were discovered in 2012. I don't believe there was any salvage operation, though. Here's Robert Falcon Scott as portrayed by B.A. Verschmidt. This painting is in the National Gallery. On the left, you have the postcard in black and white, and I thought I would display a color photograph of the actual painting, which is much more pleasing next year, and I'm hoping to see this in person when I get there. The National Portrait Gallery. This was their winter quarters. They built this hut, they called it, at Cape Evans, which he named in honor of his second in command. You can see Mount Erebus in the background, a volcano, fortunately not erupting at the time. If you're familiar with the early expeditions down there, Ernest Shackleton was there 3 years prior and made a camp in just a few miles from here. He was not supposed to be in that area because he had made an agreement with Scott that he would land at the Barrier Inlet, which was actually where Amundsen set up his camp. But Shackleton was unable to because of the conditions at the time. And so he reneged on his promise and set up camp in the area that Scott had claimed as his own. I don't think Scott ever forgave him for that. And the postcard on the right is a picture of Evans. They called him Teddy. You can see all the supplies here. They had to be self-sufficient down there, and this was a 2-year expedition, so they had to take everything they needed to last from 2 years. This was one of the postcards, a modern postcard from Stampex 1985, a New Zealand stamp show that issued all these postcards, and I have several of them in here. But the main focus of my presentation is based on you'll see in the next slide. On the left, we have Herbert Ponting. He was the expedition photographer. You can see the camera, rather bulky. He was not able to follow Scott to the pole, but he did manage to document a lot of the activities around the camp and flora and fauna. You'll notice I have red borders around these. There was 2 sets of 7 postcards, for 14 in all, that were issued upon their return based on Herbert Ponting's photographs. I have 13 of the 14. The last one has eluded me so far, but and it was not a photograph, but it was a quotation from Scott. And obviously he couldn't have carried that bulky camera to the pole. Here we have Edgar Evans and Captain Lawrence Oates. Talked about Oates. He suffered from severe frostbite on the return trip from the pole. They were running out of food. Captain Oates said he was going out for a walk. His last words to them were, "I'm just going outside and maybe some time." So he knew what he was doing. He sacrificed his life in a vain attempt to save his mates. Scott, poor Oates, was walking to his death, but though we tried to dissuade him, he knew it was an act of a brave man and an English gentleman. Here he is, and there's a postcard showing him walking out to his death. Captain Oates was selected to join this expedition because he was experienced working with horses. Horses, you say, in the Antarctic? Well, yes, they used Manchurian ponies to haul their sledges with not much success, but that's why he was there. Here we have Lieutenant Henry Bowers, in charge of, I guess, a quartermaster and rationing. And then Dr. Wilson, who was in charge of the scientific team. There were quite a few members who were there doing science totally separate from the attempt to reach the pole. And you can see here Scott, Wilson, and Bowers were trapped by a blizzard, and they were just 11 miles from a supply depot that could have saved their lives. The weather was so poor, and they were so weak that they just resigned themselves to death and stayed in their tent until they expired. They experimented trying to use these motorized sledges. They worked fine on ice, but when it got into snow, they couldn't make any progress. In fact, they were so heavy that one of them broke through the ice and sank right from the start, as soon as they unloaded from the ship. And the remaining 2 sledges were used mainly on the sea ice to help supply the depots. The team in the first summer was tasked with setting up supply depots along the route for the men who couldn't possibly travel all that way carrying everything they needed. Here's the ponies. They had 19 ponies that they imported from Russia. and had them sent to New Zealand, where they were transferred to the Terra Nova for the final leg of the journey. 2 of the ponies died before they even reached Antarctica, which was, I guess, a sign of things to come. They were used to haul supplies out to the depots along with the motorized sledge. There was talk of using the ponies having snowshoes to aid them in their trek. Unfortunately, Captain Oates was opposed to that. That probably led to the poor use of the ponies. And the ponies were, they knew that the ponies, a lot of them were not going to survive. In fact, the depot laying, but the dead animals served another purpose that provided a much needed source of meat. Not something we would do today, I don't think, but back then it was a necessary evil. They also had dogs. Here on the left, you see them just outside the ship. They had 39 dogs with them. Scott learned a lot during his first expedition about using dogs and caring for them. Every single dog on the first expedition died because they didn't have proper supplies or a sufficient supply of dog. This was a valuable lesson for Scott, and they were used to better effect this time. Well, the dogs couldn't haul as much as the ponies. They did make things easier for the men, and they provided good companionship. Here you have the men gathered around the table. You can see his cramped quarters. There was really no privacy for the men in this tiny little hut. Although when the team left for the South Pole, it did relieve the conditions somewhat, because a good share of the men went with Scott, although only 5 went all the way to the pole. The expedition was engaged in scientific studies. Penguins were something of a novelty then, not seen too much by a lot of people. There was a scientific staff of 12, led by, as I said, Dr. Edward Wilson, who was a zoologist and chief of the scientific staff. Discoveries of an extinct fossil plant called Glossoporus which is also found in Australia, New Zealand, Africa, and India, supported the ideas that the climate was formerly warm enough to support trees, and Antarctica was once united to the other land masses. This was a former supercontinent, which we call Gondwana. This is what the team called the Southern. They were all but 5 of them returned to the camp once they reached glacier. They went across the sea ice up to the edge of the glacier. Then 5 men continued. The rest of them returned to base camp. And here they are dining around a little, probably burner. That was their source of warmth and heating their food. From the point of the reaching the glacier, the 5 men who continued had to haul everything manually, pulling sledges behind them because the horses could not continue on the snow. I'll show you next a map. The green line shows Scott's team, their route to the pole. The red, you can see here, the Bay of Whales is where Amundsen started, which is also where Shackleton should have been, but was unable to land. I wanted to point out here that the base camp was actually on Ross Island, just a small rock protruding from the sea ice. The ice shelf, the Ross ice shelf, was what they crossed for at least half of the journey. Here, when they hit the actual land mass of Antarctica, is where the half the team turned around. January 18th, 1912. Scott and the 4 others reached the South Pole, only to discover a Norwegian flag, a tent, and the names of the 5 men who had been first to the pole. It was really a disappointment to them, even though they did achieve their goal of reaching the South Pole. They were sorely disappointed to know that they were second and not first. Scott entered in his journal that day, "Well, we have turned our back now on our goal of our ambition and must face our 800 miles of solid dragging, and goodbye to most of the daydreams." So they had already traveled 800 miles. Now they had to turn around and do it all again in reverse, this time without the help of the other members of the team. There's a quote from Scott's journal. I mentioned I missing the other card that has another quote on it, but I do know what the quote says. The other card reads, "For my own sake, I do not regret this journey, which has shown that Englishmen can endure hardships, help one another, and meet death with as great a fortitude as ever in the past." This is a British Museum postcard simply showing the last page of Scott's journal. It's a little hard to read his handwriting, but I copied it here. "We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker, of course, and end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more. For God's sake, look after our people." Upon news of his death, memorials started to spring up all over, not just England, but all over the British Empire, really. And you see on the right here, this statue. The statue was sculpted by his wife. She was an accomplished artist, Lady Kathleen Scott, and she sculpted this statue. There were other copies of it made. One in white marble, which is in New Zealand today. Other memorials here are on the left is a fountain that was built by Scott's friends. It was destroyed when a car crashed into it in 1979. On the right here is a photograph of the current memorial that replaced the fountain shown on the postcard. This is the last slide of my presentation, and I have a quote from Captain Scott and the Antarctic Tragedy, a book by Peter Brent. "It was not victory, but courage in adversity, which so captured the British imagination." And that's the end of my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it.
Certainly did, Tom. Thank you so much for taking the time to do it for us. I appreciate it very much. All of
Sure.
us do. I was curious. I was going to ask you if where did you happen upon all these wonderful cards? I know that you mentioned to me that you bought the collection, but where did I mean, they look like they're all published by the same group, the same company. Where'd that all come about?
Well, the old postcards by with the Pontings, I bought that as a group at auction in a British auction house, and then I found this book, and it's Postcards of Antarctic Expeditions, a catalog, 1898 to 1958, and it's very comprehensive. It's got a nice a multi-page section. It has photographs of all those postcards I showed from Ponting. I got a lot of good information from it.
So the cards,
It's, I guess, really important, I guess, to get.
oh, absolutely. The cards that you showed those were out of that book. They weren't cards that are in your collection then, right?
Oh yeah, they're in my collection.
Oh,
I have I've shown at a stamp show. I showed my exhibit of all these cards.
oh wow. Okay, thank you.
A lot of the other cards, modern cards, I accumulated over time, but I put this all together in over a period of 2 years.
Great job. Great job. We
Thank you.
appreciate it very much. Please,
Mhm.
if anybody has any questions or comments, please.
Hey, did you see that there was a tobacco card from 1925 for for Scott? Have you
Yes,
seen it?
I have some of those cards.
So you've got it already?
Well, I have
You have that one?
the one that says closest to the pole.
Yeah.
Yes, I do have that,
Okay.
as a
Just
matter of
checking.
fact.
All right, just checking. Especially since now you have some cover or some plastic covers for those.
For the cigarette cards.
Yeah, did you check those? You got them for your
No.
Christmas gift from the stamp club.
Oh, is that what they are?
Yeah, you didn't even look.
Oh, you mean these?
Yeah. Oh yeah, those.
Yeah.
Those will fit it exactly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Those
right.
those are hard to find.
Go ahead, Don.
I'd like to know who paid for the whole exhibition. Was it the Royal Geographic
Oh,
Society?
well, he had a number of benefactors. In fact, he stayed behind when the Terra Nova left England. He stayed behind to raise more money.
And
Then he had to catch up with the others.
he took an airplane.
He met the rest of the. Yeah, he was all over his rich friends, getting backers.
I say he took an airplane down there to catch him.
I don't think he took an airplane back then, right?
No, he met the team. They waited for him in South Africa.
But the people, he got benefactors who paid for that. People, rich people.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think probably the government probably pitched in some money. I don't really have all the details on that, but if it was anything like the previous expeditions, the government would kick in some money. The Geographical Society would fund him partially, and the scientific community was also very interested in it. So
I also wanted to ask you about going the first stage of the trip up to the glacier. Did they use the dogs?
no, they used the dogs, not on the trip up, but they used the dogs for. They thought the horses would make better progress.
So they didn't use the dogs. So why did they bring them all?
Well, they used them the year before when they were laying out all the supplies along the route, and then they had them in the camp for the scientific team.
Did they eat them when they died?
Not the dogs, no.
Well, they eat dogs in China, I guess.
You said that we don't need ponies anymore, but in Europe horses are meat. There
Uh-huh.
are places where you eat.
Yeah, I know.
Only horse
not
meat.
here in the United States, though.
Not in the United States. We have that.
I know.
We don't eat rabbits and we don't eat horses. Both are very good.
Well, I know my father served us horse meat when I was a child.
Well, people probably still eat it, but they don't advertise.
Yeah.
In France, they eat it now, I guess.
Yeah.
I think
In
they
Europe
still.
there are
Yeah,
you say butchers that sell only horse meat.
they have a horse's head in front of their shop.
I don't know about that.
I think so.
I appreciate you being here so much and doing a great job for us. Thank you so much.